Welcome, all you creatures of the night and late night prowlers. This is the latest podcast episode in gore and guts, slasher screams and squeals, and all the things which conjure up your nightmares. To be afraid is accepted, but it won't save you from the dangers which leer right over your shoulder and breathe down your neck. When the lights are out and the night is still, the beating of your heart will give away your hiding place. It will find you, and it will not be forgiving. This is It Records. I'm Matt Johnson.
And I'm Peter Hansen.
And this is our latest episode in the podcast It Records, and we'll be talking about the 1973 Italian film. That's right, we're going foreign this week. Torso. Or
Back to my homeland in Italy. JK, I'm not from there.
yeah, back.
But this movie is also called Bodies Bear Braces of Carnal Violence, which is a mouthful. And somehow got translated to Torso, but hey, I'm not complaining.
Yeah, no, I'm fine with it. USA is it's Torso, but in parentheses, Carnal Violence. They put it in there just so you were familiar with the original title.
And yeah, that been. Are you ready for a creepy headline?
Pete, I wait all week to hear your creepy headlines. So yes, I'm ready.
I don't know if you're ready for this one.
Yeah. I'll brace myself.
Imagine you're in a scary foreign place.
Okay, I'm there.
AKA the countryside of Florence.
All right, I'm with you.
Between 1968 and 1985, an unknown killer stalked the Tuscan countryside near Florence. History now knows this man as the Monster of Florence, which may be familiar to you as it is featured in other movies. And for the most part, his victims were copulating couples caught in the act. Typically, these youngsters who had snuck off to some isolated spot in order to make, as Bob Epbanks would say, whoopee, inside of glowing confines of Fiats, were killed at night with a .22 Beretta.
Oh man!
After death, the female victims routinely had their sexual organs removed.
Wow.
This investigation took decades, and despite being an unsolved cold case, it still acts like an underlying leech in Italian society.
So still unsolved? Is that what you're saying? Or?
Yes, and this is a whole year after Torso was released.
Okay, so this started. Wait, it started a year after,
Yes.
and then lasted almost 2 decades. Is that right? Or into the 80s?
Oh, sorry, excuse me. It started in... So, I can't do math, because Torso's 73, and this started in 1968.
Okay, so just
This person threw me off with their writing.
Wow, that truly is a creepy headline. Maybe it had some sort of influence on the film.
On the movie. Yeah, it does seem arguably similar.
Yeah, definitely. And with that being said, I can give sort of a rundown, a quick summary, if you will, of Torso, the movie. For all of you who haven't seen it, it starts with the murder of 2 college students and one's boyfriend, which leads to a manhunt for a killer whose chief weapon is a red and black ascot used to strangle his victims as well as a blade. When young college students, 4 college students, young female college students to be specific, discover that they recognize the murder weapon, she then becomes the target of the killer and agrees with her friends to head off to a local villa, her uncle's local villa, located on a nearby cliff, and that's where really the plot takes off and the murders ensue.
Very well put there.
Thanks,
Matthew.
Thank you, I appreciate that, Pete. Which also then can lead us into the reasoning why Peter and I chose a 1973 Italian horror film for our It Records podcast. Well, really, what it was, neither of us have seen this film, but it's part of an Italian film genre as well as literature during that time in the late 60s called the giallo. Is that pronouncing that correct, Pete?
You know, yeah, as good as I am at pronouncing words.
As good as your Italian is, it'll work. I'm sorry if we offend anybody. Please write in if we're pronouncing it wrong, but we're going to go with the giallo for the podcast.
Which means yellow.
Which
Fun fact.
means yellow. Which came from the paperback books, was the color of the paperback books of the giallo literature at the time. And what these movies and books constituted, they had a lot of mystery elements, almost detective fiction, but are often seen as slashers with supernatural horror. They're crime fiction. Basically, it's a mystery fiction with very grisly death scenes. Would you agree, P?
Absolutely agree.
Okay. That's really what characterized them during the time. And they were horror fiction that was popular in the late 60s to the end of the 70s.
Yeah, you got a couple in the 80s, but they really started winding down once the slashers came into play.
In the American slashers, right?
Yeah, that I feel like giallo films were obviously very popular in Italy, but I think they had a pretty prominent role in like drive-ins and
sexploitation films.
Other late night exploitation films.
Mm-hmm.
At least I would like to assume so. I don't know. I wasn't alive.
That's true. But the giallo film, and with Torso with Us, we found it interesting. Pete introduced me to it because it sort of was a predecessor and an influence, we believe, to the slasher genre that took place in America during the early to late 70s. Correct.
Yeah, definitely. It got a little start in mid 70s, but it really took off when Halloween hit the
theaters in 77, right? That was the first big one.
78, I want to say
78.
actually, but that's pulling hairs.
Yeah. Well, what the giallo film, if I can give a history lesson or try to give some context of how it relates to the slasher, is they were gruesome murder mystery thrillers, yes, but the scenes of shocking horror, stylish camera work, jarring musical arrangements. What you'll see in parallel, if you'll agree with me, not Pete, is at least what I saw in Torso is the POV cam. A lot of the POV cam of sort of a lurking character, the final female character, the use of knives or sort of blade type weapons for killing, and sex being taboo. Sex is bad. If you have sex, you're gonna die.
Is very prominent in this movie.
Oh, from the get go, from scene one, from the opening credits. It's in your face. It's a threesome, audience. It's an opening scene threesome.
There's a lot of nudity in this film, that's for sure.
That is true. Very full frontal nudity. It's the 70s in Italy. They're much more lenient with nudity and sex in films than definitely American at the time.
I was kind of shocked of how much nudity there was in this.
No, I was too. I wasn't expecting it at all, really. Yeah, but it worked well with with the movie.
Those Italians.
Yeah. But just continue with that. I see a lot of similarities between this genre, Pete, and the slasher genre. And I know the audience probably knows, but just so we can create a comparison on the podcast, what are some of the tropes with the slasher genre? Since it's your favorite, what do you typically see from character development to camera work? And we can...
Ooh, that is a very good question, man.
Yeah, and we can go back and forth and then sort of relate it to Torso so that you can see where the influences come from. Because I feel like a lot are in Torso.
I think with like tropes and slashers that are the most prominent, I feel like the killer is usually the most interesting character. And I feel like that's the case in Torso as well, where this killer is he's got really bizarre ways of killing people, and it's really gruesome, and that's like really very present in like most slashers I've seen.
Sure. Yeah. And there's sort of a, I guess, androgynous, sort of supernatural, ominous air around the killer. You don't really know their origins, per se. And also, black gloves. Black gloves are as I learned,
In
an element.
every giallo film, a whole whopping 8 or 9 of them. That is true. And another trope I like to bring up, because you can't really go without saying it when you talk about slashers, is the final girl.
Yeah.
Where I feel like that is a pure slasher trope, not really like a giallo trope. But I feel like it was very influenced by the giallo film, because especially in Torso here, where it was like a virgin girl. She was like the last girl, and she didn't like she basically persevered by surviving, but not really like fighting against the killer too much. It was just like her just kind of surviving the whole ordeal.
Sure, it wasn't as much a preconceived idea that the innocent virgin girl, which is in slashers, will be the ending of the giallo film. And to go with that, something I was reading on the giallo film is something that's characteristic. A quote from Sergio Martino, which is the director of this film and several other giallo films. The black gloves, always present, sexual ambiguity, and psychoanalytical trauma may be the heart of each film, but the genre itself is not consistent with any narrative form, which is kind of what you're saying. There's no real structure to each of them, but there's sort of these themes and ideas that kind of blurred together that created a genre.
Yeah, it's a very interesting genre, because every giallo film I've seen, it's not boring at all.
Yeah.
Like, I would say that they're very stylistic, and it makes it very watchable for someone like me, and I think watchable for other people too that are trying to look for like a different movie. And this movie shocked me too. I didn't expect it to be gratuitous violence and an obscene amount of nudity.
Yeah, definitely. And Pete, you mentioned you've seen a few giallo films. How many have you seen, roughly?
I want to say between 5 to 8.
5 to 8.
Mostly Argento and Bava.
Okay, this is your first Martino film, huh?
Yes, I want to say
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah, but what you said about you were shocked by it and the nudity and the grotesque violence, but you also mentioned that it was sort of like the skillful, I guess, way that was composed and the camera work of it was intriguing to you, which I would agree.
Yeah, I think most Italian movies, especially like, I think it's just really prominent in giallo films where they really, I don't know, I want to say, at least if we're going to Dario Argento, who really likes giallo films, like little giallo tangent for a second, he was very influenced by Hitchcock, so I feel like that's where a lot of like the stylistic camera work came from. And he I want to say his first giallo film was 1970, so that probably played an influence on this movie.
Sure. That's interesting.
And there's probably even earlier ones that I'm forgetting because I haven't seen them that have even bigger influence.
And when I mentioned just briefly a second ago, which I think ties giallo films, the slasher film, as an influence, is the psychoanalytical trauma. And just to make that less sounding psychology, basically some past event is the reasoning for all this violence and all this action happening. Something happened in the past that is now coming to the surface again. I feel like that is definitely a tenet in major slasher films, which is present in Torso. That's like the main reason why our killer in this film is attacking all these people.
Yeah, it's very quick, but it is a reason.
You say it's very...
They like have like, it's like a very like, excuse me.
You're excused.
It's like a 30-second flashback to where like, oh, this is why he's this way, which is fine because I feel like the style and the substance of the movie is carried on through most of the way, and gets excused for how early the film is in. It's like how you could like just watching it. I feel like I was like, damn, this influenced a shit ton of slashers.
Yeah.
Or at least giallo in general, because like the killer felt sets like a slasher killer.
Definitely.
And his weapon of choice was interesting, and he also had another weapon of choice, which was a hacksaw.
Yeah, which comes out in like the third act of the movie, which was one of the
and
most gruesome scenes I think of the film.
And I thought that was awesome. I've never seen that used as a weapon before.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you think it would be, but I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
And I was like, kudos to you, Torso. That was pretty.
That was
sweet.
pretty good. Yeah. And just with adding to tropes, which I could go on for days, is like we said, influence of slasher is the isolated area. Out the foreign area, the isolated area on the country villa on the cliff where nobody's at, and these 4 girls are locked up in there. Is another big one, I think. I would say.
Oh yeah, that's very prominent in slashers as well. Where, they even they take it like more extreme levels to it in slashers. Like Halloween is like this very suburban area, but they almost make it feel very isolated at the same time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which kudos to that movie. We could talk about that, but which seems like a very community-driven area where there's a lot of people, and makes it seem like you're a loner out in the middle of nowhere. Kudos, John Carpenter, if you ever listen to this. Which I'm sure you are. I'm sure you're on it every week.
Make a donation and hire me as an intern. I don't know.
got a few scripts you could look over. That'd be great.
But anyways.
So we've talked about this film, really a little bit about the film and the giallo genre, and then how it influenced or created almost the slasher genre that we know in America. So Pete, when would you say really the golden age of the slasher genre began? Was it around the same time as the giallo, or like toward the end of it? And then what started the slasher genre in America?
That's like a 3-tier question.
I needed to answer it in 10 seconds, Pete.
Well, I think my personal viewing on slashers is that it really took off with Halloween, but it got a little start before that with a few films like Texas Chainsaw and Black Christmas. But even like something like Psycho, like influenced a slasher, but I wouldn't say is a slasher, but definitely influenced it. And then you had a couple slashers between 74 and 78 that would be early slashers, but didn't get quite the fame as Halloween did, and kind of solidified it as like an official subgenre of horror. And it like understood like old tropes from horror movies and like kind of like rolled it up in a nice little knot and made a quintessential movie. And I feel like that was like kind of the end of the giallo films, was when that came into fruition.
Okay. So, out with the old, in with the new, slashers take over and are still relevant today, I would say.
They are very relevant, but I feel like there's not really too many good ones out there still.
Not the golden age as much.
I mean, yeah, the golden age I would say is the 80s, because that's when it was just chock full of slashers.
Yeah. I concur.
Good and bad.
Yeah, you take the good with the bad. Trying to find the budget, really, on a 1973 Italian film, I couldn't I couldn't find anything really on. I wouldn't say it was too high budget, really, by watching the film. If you did you find anything on it, Pete?
Yeah, I don't think there was much of a budget here because
Yeah.
I feel like the director Martino.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of him, but I don't want to say he wasn't prominent or famous or good, but I haven't really heard of him.
Yeah, so he's
And
not drawing a major budget from the
yeah, I
studio.
feel like he kind of just like made a movie he wanted
Mm-hmm.
because I feel like he was able to do it because there's a lot in here.
Yeah, that's
And
for sure.
there's not much. There's no sequels and remakes. I mean, I guess the only remakes you could consider are slasher movies because it was
Yeah.
so. The genre itself is very influential, and it just like it's a very, very entertaining movie.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, if you weren't expecting a movie with a lot of nudity,
Check out
maybe
Torso.
now. No, maybe be prepared for that because there is a lot.
Yeah.
And usually there's like a fine line between too much and like a horror film where it becomes like a pure like sex like exploitation
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I feel like there was enough in this movie for it to be like just still credible to me and very entertaining. Especially one scene that I'm going to give away that we kind of talked about earlier before we recorded was that when the last girl, after she finds all her friends dead, which
Mhm.
was pretty crazy. Like, I thought that was a pretty riveting scene.
Yeah.
And then she just sees him coming back, and she's like, "Oh shit!" Like, and trying to like hide like evidence that she was there. And I was like, "Oh, that was really smart."
Yeah.
And I
agree.
didn't kind of expect that in a movie like this.
That's a good point. I mean, I really, at first I was confused by that scene, but I really liked the way they did it because before she sees all of her friends dead, she's upstairs going to sleep for the night, and they're downstairs partying it up. You know, classic.
Yeah.
Classic partying it up, drinking, sexing. You know, having a good time. And they hear the doorbell ring. The friend, Stefan, who we kind of think is a killer, is dead. You see the killer behind him, and then it kind of like dissolves.
Yeah,
Right.
that was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I was expecting something to happen. I was like, what's going on? You see the girl upstairs. It's like a few hours later, apparently. She comes down. They're all dead. Which I thought was well done. And then her sort of survival skills after that and like covering her tracks and everything was awesome. It was a good third act, I thought.
What? Yeah, the third act really solidified the movie greatness for me.
Mm-hmm. And with that being said, solidifying its greatness, Pete, would you defend or destroy Torso?
Absolutely defend it with the sheer scene of it when she's trying to pick the lock.
Oh, yeah.
That scene actually scared me, and I don't get scared easily anymore. So
Mm-hmm.
I did when and then she like got the key out and had a cloth, but it missed the cloth, and then
Mhm.
the killer notices it and he just puts on the cloth, and I was like, "Oh, fuck!"
Yeah.
Like that's literally. I think I literally said that out loud.
Yeah, it jolted me back into the movie. I was like, oh, no, no. He's just like toying with her to open the door.
And a thing that I would say is that I kind of forgot who the killer was. I watched it a few days ago,
Mm-hmm.
and before the recording, and I don't remember who it is.
Would you like me to... Should I spoil it by this point?
Full spoiler alert
Yeah.
at this point.
So pause it for like 15 seconds. I'm going to give away who the murderer was.
Mute your headphones right now.
Or tune in if you're into spoilers. But, Peter, the killer was the art history teacher.
Oh yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Who, which we didn't talk about, but had a weird obsession with dolls.
Oh,
And they're all
yeah.
dolls. They're all dolls to him. All the girls, all the bitches. He says are all dolls, and they're all the same.
Yeah.
Which is a weird sort of underlying feature in this whole film.
That was weird. I almost forgot about that.
Yeah. Mhm. But it's in it from the first scene, really, which is a testament to it that you kind of just forget about it. But it was in from scene one, and like throughout
Yeah.
each killing almost.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the opening shot's pretty great, with that being said.
Yeah, it is. But everybody can tune back in. By the way, unmute, turn it back on. We're done with spoilers. I would also, though, Pete, have to say I defend it. I defend Torso. Had never seen it going in or a giallo film, but I was entertained the whole time. The third act I said was great. I really just like the camera work with it and the musical compositions, which are very interesting, very I guess jarring juxtaposition to what was happening. And it does have its influences on the slasher film extremely, and I'm a huge slasher film fan. So defend, please see it, everybody, or just see a giallo film. Honestly,
Ooh. Yeah, because I feel like that is something that I feel like a lot of people our age don't really watch. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that.
Yeah. They're not going out on every Friday night watching a giallo film.
No research done, but I'm gonna say that most people probably have not seen a giallo film.
Well, let me pull up my spreadsheet real quick here, Pete. I got some bar charts and some pie charts. Bar charts? Pie charts? I don't have anything.
Some
You can clearly
Venn
tell.
diagrams.
But with our ratings in for this week, that basically wraps up our deep analysis into Torso, and we'll be back next week, bi-weekly. So, in 2 weeks we'll be back with our next full-length episode with the podcast It Records. But in the meantime, we will be dishing out another mini episode. If you didn't catch the last one, go back. It's smaller, hence mini. It's about 15 minutes long. We talk about horror subgenres. And so tune in the next mini episode. You'll hear what the title is, as well as the title of our next podcast, what movie we'll be discussing.
Ooh, I can't wait myself.
And I'm excited, and I hope you've all enjoyed our recording of Torso. I'm Matt Johnson. Until next time, I remain in the shadows.
I'm Peter Hansen, and I'm just a ray of sunshine.
Jesus Christ. Woo. All right. Wasn't expecting that.
With that being said, don't forget to check out our website. God damn it. I almost said it follows. It Records. It Records is the name of our podcast, and It Records Podcast WordPress is how you would find our website. That, give us some feedback.
Yeah.
Submit some artwork, maybe. Who knows? Some cool things we're trying to do.
Yeah, and check out our blogs. We'll be trying to get those up as soon as possible and out as regularly as we can.